Do you oppose the use of criminal contempt charges against people who refuse to testify before Congress?
No, we've used it. I mean, we contempt Lois Lerner after a year of hearings and investigation.
You sure did, didn't you? You said the U.S. attorney had a legal duty to go to the grand jury, didn't you?
Well, it says shall. When the Congress voted for contempt, it says shall go to the grand jury. That U.S. attorney did it.
That's right. And you also said the U.S. attorney unilaterally decided to ignore the will of the House of Representatives.
It's true.
You said Mr. Manchin was legally bound to convene a grand jury, but indeed he ignored his obligation and unilaterally decided to ignore the will of the House of Representatives. Don't you think it's important that when we're exercising our Article I powers to get the evidence we need in order to legislate, that people obey the subpoenas of the United States House of Representatives? You used to believe that, Mr. Jordan. Do you no longer believe that?
Once a legitimate investigation, sure.
All right.
Sure.
In 2012, the Oversight Committee approved a resolution holding Attorney General Holder in contempt of Congress. Do you remember that one?
Say it again. I was thinking I was going to elaborate on the answer when you cut me off to ask me the question again,
Well,
please.
continue, Mr. Jordan, because everybody's always violating your rights, so I'm going to give you all the time you want.
No one's violating my rights.
Okay. Well, look, let me remind you what you said when Attorney General Holder was held in criminal contempt of Congress. We simply want the facts, because Attorney General Eric Holder will not provide what the law requires. We are left with no other option except to hold him in contempt. We're doing the exact same thing, Mr. Jordan, with all the bluster about the border and all the other nonsense you're talking about with Russia and everything. We are holding him in contempt for violating a subpoena of the United States House of Representatives.
There wasn't some special select committee that Republicans were not permitted to serve on that issued those subpoenas. That's not the case.
All right, well, let's close with this. Mr. Jordan, why did you vote against the commission of 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats equals subpoena power? Why did you oppose that? Are you also not interested in what happened to us on January 6th?
Of course, everyone is interested in holding people accountable who did wrong. The FBI is doing that. The Justice Department is doing that appropriately. So what I'm not interested in.
So why did you have all those Benghazi investigations if you don't think Congress should be investigating?
Because Hillary Clinton misled the American people.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back to you. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
If you want to...
Of all the things not to do, trying to take on Jamie Raskin on the subject of law should probably be at the top of Jim Jordan's list. Here, Raskin is making blatantly obvious the double standard by which Jordan operates on, by which he opposes Steve Bannon being held in contempt for violating a congressional subpoena, and yet, at the same time, knows that those who are subpoenaed are legally bound to show up and comply with that subpoena. It'd almost be better if Jordan was too ignorant to even know the law while grandstanding against Bannon showing up, but he's not. He knows full well that Bannon has a legal obligation to comply with that subpoena, just like he knew full well when he demanded that Obama's Attorney General Eric Holder comply with the subpoena in 2012-2013. So it's not that he doesn't know the law, he just doesn't think it applies to Republicans. But that's not the only time that Jim Jordan steps in it, because immediately after making it clear that he understood that subpoenas need to be complied with, he claimed that those other subpoenas were different because those weren't issued by select committees that Republicans weren't able to serve on. Only minor problem with that. First of all, there are Republicans serving on this select committee. Liz Cheney is the vice chair of the committee, and Adam Kinzinger, along with former Republican lawmaker Denver Riggleman, serve on it as well. And second, the only reason we even have a January 6th select committee is because Republicans voted against a bipartisan commission. Democrats proposed a commission modeled after the 9/11 commission, split evenly, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, with members from both parties being required to approve all subpoenas, a truly bipartisan effort. And yet Republicans decided to filibuster it in the Senate by a vote of 54-35. And then they have the audacity to turn around and claim that Democrats didn't let them serve? Give me a break. And finally, the worst misstep of all in what was basically a masterclass by Raskin, he asked Jim Jordan why he supported Congress's Benghazi investigation if his position is that Congress shouldn't be doing any investigations and that should be left up to the DOJ and the FBI. And Jordan's response was, quote, because Hillary Clinton misled the American people. Jamie Raskin quite literally could not have hoped for a better answer. I mean, dear God, Jim Jordan is either so high on his own supply that he can't see the irony in his statement, or he sees it, but he's just too much of a partisan hack to care. But either way, he proved Raskin's point in an almost comically perfect way. If Jim Jordan thinks that someone misleading people is justification to hold an investigation, then of course the January 6th committee's investigation is warranted. The entirety of the events of January 6th were born out of the big lie, which was literally the result of months of Trump misleading his supporters into thinking that the election was stolen. And that was despite every shred of proof actually affirming that the election wasn't stolen. Remember, there were more than 60 court cases, and not in a single one of them was fraud proven, including by 8 judges who Donald Trump himself appointed. Trump's own Department of Justice, led by Bill Barr, admitted there was no fraud. The Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity Unit admitted there was no fraud. Republican governors and Republican secretaries of state admitted that there was no fraud. Every state certified its vote tallies. Every single recount and audit confirmed the original counts. I mean, hell, they couldn't even get the sham audit in Arizona to pretend that Trump won, instead finding that Biden won with an even larger lead than the official count. Any way you cut it, Trump lost and there wasn't a shred of fraud to point to. And yet still Trump and his acolytes pretended that there was, and continue to pretend to this very day. Not because they actually think that there was fraud, they know full well that there wasn't, but because the whole point of the big lie is to manipulate the Republican base so that A, they can protect Trump's brand so that if and when he runs again in 2024, he doesn't seem like the loser that he is, and B, so that Republicans can continue to pass voter suppression bills across the country under the pretense of election security. If they admitted the reality that the election was secure, they'd lose their justification to pass these bills. And so instead, they engage in political theater and clutch their pearls and cry foul, knowing full well that the fraud claims are bogus, but that their own efforts to prevent likely Democratic voters from casting ballots are very real. So if the issue here, as far as Jim Jordan is concerned, is misleading people, then I'm pretty sure that we've got ample rationale to carry on with this investigation. And of course, Jim Jordan knows that too, and if you needed proof that he knows that, just rewatch the final seconds of this exchange, where Jordan blurts out that the investigation into Hillary Clinton was justified because she misled the American people, prompting Jamie Raskin to immediately yield back the balance of his time, followed by the most pitiful, defeated sigh that you'll ever hear from anyone in Jim Jordan.
So why did you have all those Benghazi investigations if you don't
motivated
think Congress
investigation.
should be investigating?
Because Hillary Clinton misled the American people.
Mr.
She's
Chairman, I yield back
wanna-
to you. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
If you want to,
If you've ever wondered what it looks like at the very moment someone realizes they've just gotten buried in their own bullshit, now you know. So Jim Jordan and the rest of Trump's cronies will continue to keep up this charade, but after watching this exchange, you can see that Jim Jordan is well aware that his argument has no merit. He knows that he was caught in the web of his own lies, and so while he continues to manipulate the people that he's convinced to trust him, it is now blatantly obvious the extent to which Republicans view their own base not as constituents to serve, but as marks to exploit. Because Jim Jordan is looking to help anyone but himself and the one guy that he's loyal to. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.